Hello and welcome to the Arsenal Women Arsecast on Arseblog.com with me, your host, Tim Stillman. Yes, that's right. As if you already needed any further confirmation, North London is red. Arsenal beating Tottenham very, very soundly, 5-0 at Emirates Stadium on Sunday afternoon. And that's the men and the women's teams doing the double over Tottenham. So that's very nice, isn't it? And to be honest, I spoke to some people before this game and I said I really felt Arsenal should be winning this game quite handily, not least because Spurs have conceded quite a lot of goals this season and don't look defensively particularly tight, and that's very much how this game turned out. But here to discuss that game with me, Jamie is in her sickbed and actually had to miss this game today, regrettably, but our erstwhile match reporter, Aidan Gibson, joins us. Aidan, thanks so much.
Yeah, pleasure to be on.
And, this just before we kind of go through the game and the starting lineups and all the things we kind of usually do, what was your feeling coming into this game around, I'm usually pretty confident with North London derbies. Obviously, we've had a couple of games where we had that draw a couple of seasons ago away. We lost away last season, but at home, we tend to make very short work of Spurs. I think, was this in line with what you were expecting before the game?
Yeah, I have to say I was fairly confident that Arsenal were going to not only win, but win quite comfortably. I think last season, when we beat Spurs at home, we dominated that game, but didn't, I think, take enough chances. So I think we also owed them a little bit. But I mean, in the game at Tottenham earlier this season, they offered very, very little. They offered very, very little against Manchester United. There's a really good piece in The Guardian about their record against the top four teams in the WSL, and it's abysmal, and they've been really poor this season. So I thought it would be pretty comfortable. Also because, Tottenham really do subscribe to the one club line of thinking, and Tottenham get battered everywhere they go.
Yeah, I mean, I'd read something, I think in the Cutback, which is the site Flo Lloyd Hughes runs, and they have a very good writer about Spurs women, and they were talking about how Spurs just haven't really been able to sort out their approach really in these games. So earlier in the season, they took a couple of heavy defeats. They went to Man United. They played Man United at home a few weeks ago. They tightened that up, but barely had a shot. So they're really struggling with the balance of these games. And actually, I was in Robert Villaham's post-match press conference. I kind of felt sorry for him as well, because obviously he has to sit there and field all these questions. And most of his answers were just flavours of, they're quite a bit better than us. And he was referring to the gap and the level, and we'll talk about Russo, but he was saying she's world class, and he was saying, look, I have to sit here and look a bit stupid, but ultimately they're just a lot better than we are. And I do think that was the truth of it. But starting lineups kind of came in. Kim Little, Beth Mead, on the bench. Beth's had a bit of a tight calf the last couple of games. Kim's had surgery on a broken finger. Any surprises for you in there? Obviously, Arsenal rotated reasonably heavily for the LCL game last week, but I think I'm right in saying this is one of those occasions where I got in the predicted lineups in the match preview. I think I got this spot on. Any surprises or anything remarkable there for you?
No, I don't think so. I saw the lineup and it made sense. It made I think the one question I had coming into the game was whether Lotta would continue at centre half, and then obviously it comes out later that she was unavailable with a muscular problem. So absent that, I think it was pretty much the 11 you would expect.
Yeah, and we've got some questions actually about the Leah Volti Kyra Cooney Cross partnership, which suddenly looks okay. One of the things that I think, Aidan, that's really interesting this season is some of these questions that we've had have kind of gone away. Do you remember the kind of can Frida and Russo play together? I haven't seen that. I haven't seen anyone ask that for months. Then there was a question I know I asked several times about whether Leah Volti and Kyra Cooney Cross could play together. I've been very quiet on that the last few months. I don't think that's an issue anymore. Like, is that, is that down to confidence, do you think? Do you think that's down to some of the tactical things that Renee might have done?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things on this. I think, first of all, just some of the tactical changes that Renee's made compared with Jonas. I think the way that she's using Kyra Kinney-Cross makes a lot of sense, makes a lot of sense for how uh, her profile, and I think that just makes it easier for Leah to play with Kyra. And then, yeah, the Maanum Russo one is one that I also had a lot of questions about. And I think, honestly, I think part of it too is uh, Renee has sort of stuck with the same lineup for most of her time. Obviously, she's had to rotate here and there for injury and things like that. And she made a big change when she brought Steph Catley into centre half, but she's kind of stuck with a fairly predictable lineup. And I think uh, more than anything else, that just gives some players a lot of rhythm, right? I think that, the best way to kind of build combinations and build partnerships is to actually play together in real competitive matches. And I think when you look at and I think Frida and Russo is a great example, because what happened last season, Frida never really got a really strong run of the team. There was a lot of chopping and changing. I think there are the times when you can chop and change, and you can make starting 11s based more on your opponent. But I also think that you really need to have a base to do that. And I think, again, looking at Frida and Russo, I don't think there's a base to say, okay, in this game, Frida, you're going to play with Russo up front, but then in this game, you're going to have Stina, because those are two very different strikers, two different styles. And I think now there's a better base to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation, actually. I think maybe under Jonas it got a bit too much looking at the opposition, and obviously you've got to do that to a degree, and I think a player here and there, or maybe a tweak here and there, but maybe it went a little bit too much on the side of doing that and changing the team quite a lot. And obviously then there's a balance about how you keep players involved. The ones that don't get in the team, how do you keep them connected to the team and keep them energised? But something about Tottenham's approach here as well. I read again in the cutback, the really good blog about Spurs women, and it was talking about how they concede a lot of goals on the left side of their defence, and it was talking about how, like, Man United made some really good kind of progress down there. And actually what they do in this game, they swap their wide players. So Hayley Russo plays on the left when she usually plays on the right, and Jessica Naz plays on the right, because what they do, Spurs, with Jessica Naz, is they basically leave her up as a second striker. They don't ask her to come back. They don't really ask her to do any defending. They want her for the fast kind of counter-attack. And I did want to ask Robert Villaham this, but look, when you're in a press conference and you're the Arsenal women guy and you're the Spurs women press officer, I'm not the first person you're going to come to. So I didn't get to ask that question, understandably. And but I wondered whether it was more to do with the weakness defensively on Tottenham's left-hand side, and they wanted Russo defensively there, or whether they put Jessica Naz on kind of Arsenal's left, because maybe that's the space that Arsenal leave when they ask Katie McCabe to kind of go forward and go into midfield. So, I mean, look, it didn't really have any impact, but what do you make of that change? Do you think that was more about potentially attacking what Spurs might have seen as an Arsenal weakness, or a bit more about bolting the back door a little bit?
I think it was potentially a mix of both, and trying to have Jessica Naz take advantage of that space that is left behind when Katie McCabe pushes up. I think everybody knows now that ideally the left centre back rolls out to left back, and Arsenal build in the three. And yeah, if you lose the ball, you can transfer. There are gaps that you can exploit. Brass is a good defensive. She works hard. She's a good defensive player for a winger. So I think it was sort of a mixture of both. The other sort of change to that I thought was interesting is, I think Beth England was really dropping deep at times, especially in the first half. So I think it was, that was another aspect of it where she would drop deep, and perhaps the idea was, okay, she drops deep, she gets the ball, and then we'll have Russo and Naz breaking. But it didn't really pan out that way.
No, it didn't indeed. And I thought Spurs started reasonably well, but Arsenal opened the scoring on 10 minutes. It's actually an own goal in the end from Claire Hunt. But, Tottenham get caught a little bit playing out from the back. Hayley Rasso falls as she tries to control the ball. Cooney Cross, to your point, she's really been utilised a little bit higher up. To go and win the ball, and then we all know the sort of delivery she's capable of. And I mean, I'm about 3/4 of the way through writing the analysis piece, which is going to be on Russo, and it's 80% of the article so far is kind of really praising Russo and her performance, but a good 20% of it almost starts to read like a Claire Hunt slander piece, to be honest, because it, I think Russo gave her a real chasing on the day, and it was the start of a pretty bad afternoon for Claire Hunt. But, probably not quite against the run of play. I think Arsenal do have a shot through Katie McCabe beforehand, but it wasn't an electric start. But once that goal went in, that was it, really, right?
Yeah, I think it took Arsenal a little bit of time to come to grips with how Spurs were defending. Just they had basically Spurs had a good start for like 5 minutes, and then after that, Arsenal started controlling the ball. All 10 Tottenham outfield players are in the Tottenham half, and that has given Arsenal problems in the past. And the McCabe chance that comes from a free kick, that comes, it's not necessarily an open play chance. But then, yeah, right after that, it was just, I think that was the first time where Arsenal were actually able to utilize their pressing, because Tottenham were actually trying to build out of the back from a goal kick. And they just got it horribly wrong. And I think, and then Arsenal were very quick, win the ball back, quick transition goal. And that's really what you need to do to break down a team that's playing two banks, that's playing deep, because in that moment, Tottenham were completely unorganized because they had been set up to build from the back, and all of a sudden they're defending.
Yeah, and actually, one of the things Robert Villaham said afterwards was he talked about how, Tottenham were trying to almost bait Arsenal into crossing the ball, which a lot of teams who, play deep blocks do, because they back themselves in terms of their numbers to be able to deal with the crosses. But I'm not sure Spurs did deal with the crosses too well. Like Russo has another header at the end of the half. I think Frida has a header that just goes over. Like, I just don't think Claire Hunt and Molly Bartip are the ones who are going to be really heading missiles out of a penalty area. So I kind of think Arsenal were kind of comfortable crossing the ball when they needed to. But then, after this goal, there's a chance where Russo really does a really nice turn on the area on Claire Hunt. And one of the things Renee said post-match, Aidan, was she used a phrase that kind of jumped out at me. She said, Russo's finding her edge. And I liked that phrase, because I think if Russo's had, I wouldn't call it an issue, but there were two things about Russo that I felt needed improvement last season. One, working out when to come to the ball and when to get the hell away from it. And she's got that balance very, very finely done now. But there were times as well where I felt she was too nice, for want of a better word. And in this game, like, she bullies Claire Hunt, basically. And the other thing I love about this chance is actually she could pull it back to Frida. When you look at it, Frida's kind of free on the penalty spot, but Russo takes the shot, and like, I like that. I kind of want my striker to feel confident. And, this is another great performance from Russo, but like, not just in this game. I mean, the last 4 or 5 months, she has been, for me, like absolutely in that kind of Bunny Shaw level. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of last season when I was last on, we both talked about, Russo had scored like 7 goals in 8 games or something like that. we were starting to see like the player that we wanted to see. And then obviously, like the rest of the team, she has a kind of iffy start to the season. And actually, one of the things that I really appreciated, and I love that phrase from Renee, but like she backed herself to beat Claire Hunt. And I know you have talked about this with Jamie on the podcast, but there's that Chelsea home game where she gets the ball in the penalty area and she lays it off. She doesn't look to take the shot. She lays it off. And here, what does she do? She could have laid it off. She could have, with her back to the defender, she could have just played a 1-2. That would have been fine. But she backed herself not only to beat Claire Hunt, but then she backed herself to score. And I think that's just for for all of Cena's finishing issues. Just to draw a comparison, one thing that we can say about Cena is that she is not shot shy. She is not she's not laying the ball off. She's going for goal. And I think that's what really good strikers need to do. They need to just back themselves and they need to take shots, because ultimately, if you have 4 or 5 chances a game, it's more likely you're going to score 1 or 2 goals, rather than if you're just trying to craft, the perfect opportunity. You might not get the perfect opportunity. So yeah, I think that's finding her edge is a really great way of describing it, because I think that's exactly what happens, right? She not only backs herself to beat these defenders who she can easily beat, but she's backing herself to score too, even from slightly tighter angles.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a point right at the beginning of the first half where Claire Hunt gets booked and Cooney Cross sends the ball into the channel, and Russo's just got no right to get to it at all, but she really fights for it. She gets it. And then, she doesn't just get it and hold it. She wins. There's, a lot of shirt tugging going on and stuff. She's nearly pulled over. She stays up. She gets it. And then the second she gets it, she just drives at Claire Hunt again straight away. And in the end, Claire Hunt takes her out and takes the yellow card. And I think that's that kind of that ruthlessness that perhaps we weren't seeing quite enough of before this. And because, we talk about finding her edge and all of that, I don't think you can't ask a person or a player to change their character. I don't think Alessia Russo is going to become a horrible bastard overnight because a coach tells her to. But you can be in a footballing sense, really have that ruthlessness and that edge. And yeah, and look, ultimately, look at how the third goal comes about, right? It's a deflected shot from Frida. Maybe she shouldn't take it, but she does, and it goes in. But I think Russo's just been absolutely top class. And then, we get a second goal. And actually, in the second goal from Mariona, Russo has a good part in that as well, because when the ball breaks to Mariona on the edge of the box, she just stands in front of Claire Hunt and stops her from blocking the shot. But we're waxing lyrical about Leslie Russo, who was voted player of the match, but I think I posted at the time, and no issue at all with Russo being voted player of the match, but I think Mariona ran her close. It's a really, really nice goal. And there was a question in the press conference afterwards where someone, likened her to a conductor. And she's another one who she was always good. She's been good since she came in, pretty much all the time. But I think this last couple of months, she's finding that other level.
Yeah, one thing that I really appreciate about Mariana, and it's so obvious when you watch it going back, the first bit of the first half today, she spends a lot of time sort of coming over not only to the middle but to that right inside half space, and then Frida spins out, and you've got you're consistently getting combinations and overloads on the right hand side. But then she also knows when she has to stay on the left or when she can open space up on the left. She's just such an intelligent player. Her movement is so intelligent, and I think that really allows her to influence Arsenal's game, right? Because I think that's what we're seeing now. I think maybe the first couple of months she was a little bit on kind of like a spare part, those players who sort of they're very good, but they're not always influencing the game. And now we're seeing
luxury almost.
Yeah, exactly. And now we're seeing that sort of involved in the build-up of so many moves. And yeah, I wouldn't have, the first couple of months, I wouldn't have said she was a conductor. But now I think like you're seeing that, you're seeing not only you're seeing the influence and the involvement. And I think a lot of it just stems from being given the freedom to move around the pitch, but also knowing when to go over to the inside right because we can create an overload, or actually I'm going to stay out here on the wide left because Katie's coming on the underlap, and that gives me the space to play a pass into Russo, like she did for the first time Russo ragdolls Claire Hunt. And I think we're just like with Mariona, it's just like there's so many tricks to her game. But yeah, she's been unbelievable. And I think Kyra Cooney-Cross had a good January, but for me, Mariona was the player of the month last month. Yeah, I think she's just been at a different level.
Yeah, definitely, and I think one of the things Renee's just done smartly is just found out, maybe just having a fresher perspective on it, maybe a little bit from her individual player development role, but just working out, okay, where are these players best? Like, where do they operate best? It's like Kyra, right? Like, in build up, she's very low, she's very deep because she can pass. But then when Arsenal are attacking, she's very high because she's good at kind of snapping into those interceptions. And it's kind of the same with Mariona. And actually, a lot of what Katie McCabe does enables that as well, because Katie's very good. She's not just pushing up on the left wing, she's inverting into midfield. There's a point, actually, I think it's just after the first goal where Russo kind of plays across from the corner of the area, which is an area Arsenal really like. And it's actually Katie McCabe on the back post, like from the right wing. And you look back at the replay and you're like, is that Katie? Like, what the hell was she doing there? But she's another one who like interrelates so well to Mariona's positioning. And that's why she plays every minute of every game, because she's so important at doing that. And I think another player who kind of really helps with that as well. And Renee spoke a lot, Aidan, post-match about how compact Arsenal has been defensively, and how few goals they're conceding, how few chances they're giving away. Spurs take over an hour to have a shot on target in this game, and they do have good attackers, like Jessica Naz is in the England squad. Beth England probably should be in the England squad. Hayley Rasso's, she must have over 100 caps for the Matildas. Like, they've got good attackers, but they kind of didn't get a sniff. And, Renault was very quick to praise Steph Catley afterwards, but she also praised Aaron Dantino, the assistant, who she said he takes they don't split the team up, but so much, but he works on the out of possession game and she works on the in possession game. And yeah, just your impressions of Arsenal's, I guess, their compactness in recent months and in this game.
Yeah, I think a lot of it obviously stems too from the players at the back, from that partnership that Steph and Leah have created. I also think too we're just seeing really good pressing from the front as well, and we're seeing the team move in relation to that. Right, we talk about we see it in the first goal, but we also see it when Spurs are unable to get beyond the halfway line. I mean, the whole team kind of steps up, and they have really good distances. I think that's the kind of crucial thing, and I think that's something that oddly went away from Arsenal's game at the beginning of the season. Like, I think the distances were not good at all, both in possession and out of possession, and that's come back. And I think that's sort of that's where a lot of that stems from, right? Because if you compress the space between the lines, it's much harder for players to be in pockets of space to potentially hurt you. And when you look at that first chance that Spurs have, the first shot on target, it comes from a set piece. It's not even from open play, and they win a corner, and obviously that comes from open play. But I think a lot of it stems just how good structurally Arsenal are, and they've been good structurally before, and I think sort of lost that at times last season, especially at the beginning of this season. And yeah, just get it. I think that again, it's one of those areas where there was quite a lot of chopping and changing in the team, both at the end of last season and the beginning of this season. And I think we can talk about the the confidence it instills in the team, but also again, just same as on the ball. When you have the same players next to you, you kind of know, like, okay, Kyra's gonna, Kyra's the trigger for pressing. That means that we have to step up, right? All those things sort of get easier when you have sort of understanding with the rest of the team.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was kind of one of the ways I could tell it had gone under Jonas. Like after that Bayern game, when I'd kind of ask him the uncomfortable question about whether his message was still getting through. I prefaced the question with, I'm just not used to seeing Arsenal look this ragged off the ball. Like I never associated that with Jonas teams, and that something had definitely gone. I do think probably an underrated aspect of this as well is that Leah was kind of in and out at the beginning of the season, particularly those first games where Jonas was still in charge, where she had concussion, and then she was out again, and then she played for England when she wasn't really fit, and she got a lot of but now she's kind of fit and firing and playing every game, and that makes such a difference to Arsenal both in and out of possession. I think Leah's one of those players who's so good so often that it just washes over you after a while, and you just get really used to it, and you start to take it for granted, really, how good she is and how important she is to this team. But Arsenal go in 2-0 up at half-time, which is kind of largely what I expected at this stage. And then if they started the first half a bit slowly, Arsenal didn't start the second half slowly. They get both, I think, two Spurs defenders are booked in the first 5 minutes of the half. Arsenal come out very, very aggressive. And then Aidan Maanum scores, from the edge of the box, a deflected goal. That's the Aidan Maanum goal, really, cut back shot from the edge of the area. And she had a few that had been deflected. One, I think, away at Spurs a couple of years ago, one against Man United. And yeah, I thought initially that Frida had a quiet game, but actually, again, I'm up to about 65 minutes on a rewatch, and actually she didn't. She was really, really involved, perhaps not in as eye-catching a way as Russo and Mariona, but I mean, at this point, I think you can just see Spurs, the kind of the heart rip in half, and that's that really at that point.
Yeah, I think on Frida, yeah, she did a lot of things off the ball, I think, first half, a lot of, creating space, spinning into, one thing I noticed really early on, Mariana would come over to the right or sort of right centre, and Frida would spin out, and Caitlin would go in, and I think Frida has like a good cross. I think before it's 1-0, and then obviously she's involved. Third goal, a second goal too, right? She's the one who plays the pass to Mariona, again, sort of from that kind of right hand side. I think she was really good at picking up those pockets of space in between Spurs lines, and I think in the second half, Arsenal were just that little bit sharper, a little bit more aggressive, and I think Spurs were also a little laxer between the lines. I think in part because they're 2-0 down, they sort of have to go for it a bit. All of a sudden, Arsenal players are turning the Spurs defenders, and they're getting them 1v1. They're getting in behind them. The build up for the goal actually comes after Ford gets dealed in, booked, and from the free kick, Arsenal keep the ball, but then again, Ford's in space. She's found by Leah, and then by Leah Valti, and then she just picks out Frida, who's again in between those lines. And yeah, an unfortunate day for Claire. She
the really, deflection on this is so weird. When I watched it back,
she's punched it, right? She's kind of punched it.
And like you're taught as a defender, don't. And I know it's obviously easier said than done. Like, don't turn your back on the ball or whatever. But she turns so deliberately. It's like, look, the ball can just hit you and go in, but like she almost did everything possible to make it go in the corner. Like if you watch it back, it's kind of a weird movement, actually, but. Yeah, not a great day for her. And then Arsenal get a fourth, and they kept kind of picking their way through Spurs with these kind of quick one-touch combinations on the counter. They have one a couple of minutes earlier where Russo goes down the right and she pulls it back, but there's nobody there. And then they kind of do the same again and again in the build up to this. Lovely touch from Frida. Leah Williamson clips the ball kind of out of a tight space. Lovely touch from Frida. And then Caitlin Ford just has 50 yards of space to run into. And Caitlin's another one who has a really good game, I think, in a quiet way that people might not notice as much. But the run Russo makes here, I mean, clever because she's really challenging Claire Hunt. It's kind of, you come with me and you leave it open for Caitlin, or you go with Caitlin and you leave me open. And you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of Havertz's goal a couple of weeks ago. Was it against Man City where Martinelli and he goes on the outside, and this was like very, very similar. And the first one an own goal, but like a goal the very least that Russo deserves, and 4-0 on, what was it, 58 minutes? I mean, definitely game over, but I still wasn't expecting Spurs to be picked apart quite that easily on the counter.
Yeah, and I think, again, you should see the sort of confused approach Spurs have, because the move again comes from Spurs are trying to build an attack. Leah Williamson gets back, wins the ball. Arsenal player Emily Fox, I think, plays it back to Van Domselaar, who then picks out Leah Williamson, and then Spurs just get turned way too easily. The flick from Frida is really, really lovely and really makes the goal because she had time. She could have taken it down herself and carried the ball, but she just plays it first time, and then it's 3v3, and at that point, you expect Arsenal to score. There's actually quite a similar counter attack at the end of the first half where Caitlin gets played through, and she either doesn't have quite enough pace, or she's looking for a pass that isn't quite there. She doesn't have the numbers and support. This time, really good at carrying the ball and plays the pass at the right moment. I think that's the crucial part too. She releases it just at the point where she's got to either shoot or pass, and she makes that decision. And it's an easy, not an easy finish, but you'd back Russo to score at that point.
Yeah, definitely. And that breakaway in the first half, I forgot to mention that in the running order, because that was right on my side. And I was like, obviously press box etiquette, I have to say this stuff in my head, but I was like, go for goal. Just drive for the goal. And sometimes when you see a player collect the ball and you can already see them looking for someone, and you're like, no, don't, look at the goalkeeper, look at the goal, that's where you need to go. But this time Russo really was with her, and maybe she caught it off the back of her instep a bit more than she intended, but in off the post. And then at this point, kind of party time in the crowd, really. Chloe Kelly comes on to one of the biggest ovations I've ever heard, probably since Beth and Leah kind of came back from their, all of the ACL players really, since they all came back, but this might even have been bigger than that. But I mean, what did you make of the kind of the Chloe Kelly signing? And I mean, preempting maybe some questions we've got in the second half, but there's quite an outpouring of love there. And I know she's an Arsenal Academy product, but I'm going to wager, and I don't say this pejoratively or judgmentally at all, I'm going to wager most of the people in the crowd probably, weren't around or watching Arsenal Women when she was there in 2016, 2017 kind of time. So, a big outpouring of love for this player. What did you make of the signing? And do you think there's any chance of her staying beyond the end of the loan period?
I thought it was a really good signing. I think Arsenal fans in general have had a lot of opinions about market opportunities, but I think there is a market opportunity for this player, and they took it. I think it. Look, Arsenal have been, you've said it on this podcast a lot of times. We've all said it. Arsenal have been short in the wide areas, so basically since 2022. And she adds to that. I also think, just in terms of stylistically, right, she is a winger. She's not a wide forward. She's a winger. She likes to go on the outside. She obviously scores and assists a lot of goals, right? She's very capable of doing that, but she goes on the outside. We really only have Caitlin who does that, and we've seen in recent weeks what happens when we don't have Caitlin. It doesn't quite, the balance isn't quite there. So I thought, given given what the opportunities are to sign someone in January, you're signing someone either from basically either from a league that's in an off season, or it's something like this. This is a really good player who's out of favour at Manchester City, and he was available, and I think it was a good move, and yeah, I mean, I think I would be shocked if there wasn't at least some discussion about keeping her beyond this loan period, because essentially, right, we know she's not going back to City. Her contract's up at the end of June. I'd be shocked if there isn't at least some discussion about it, because you've got the player in the club, in the building, as Renee likes to say. So,
Yeah.
Obviously
It's not hard to have a conversation.
yeah, and look, um, I think there's been a very savvy media campaign, both from Chloe and from the club, building up the Arsenal Academy thing, the Art Chloe thing. I'm absolutely guilty of falling to this. It's great. I love it. We all love stuff about the Arsenal Academy, and players coming through. But I feel like if there wasn't and maybe this is me ascribed, finding something when there isn't there, but I would be very surprised, given the things that she said, both in the post match today to the BBC, in the roundtable she did the other day. I would be surprised if there's at least not some consideration from the player about staying here, and I'd be very surprised if the club weren't considering it, especially when you consider some of the other, there is a commercial side of this too from the club, right? And Chloe Kelly is probably one of the fourth, fifth most recognizable England players in the country, and you've already got three of the others. So I would be very surprised if there wasn't some consideration, assuming that she doesn't end up being like Raheem Sterling, which I think is very unlikely. But
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't see I see a player that's still got something, a lot to give. Like, I didn't really detect a drop in her level at Man City. From what I gather, it was mainly behind the scenes. But yeah, I think it's reasonably well known that she favoured a move to United, which City just weren't going to countenance. But I mean, I think part of that was probably that she thought she's probably more of a nailed-on starter there, than she is for Arsenal. And obviously, there's the whole thing about, I mean, she's got to get a place back in the England squad at the moment. But once she does, the player she's competing with is also Arsenal, which is, potentially suboptimal for her. But now she's here. And, I gather she was very settled in Manchester as well, but she's from London. So and she's been at the club before, and maybe now that's happened. But I do think there is something in the kind of feeling the love of the crowd. And Renee was talking afterwards about how much she's been smiling. This is a player who's been unhappy for a little while, who's been in a bad situation at her club and has kind of been frozen out, fallen out with the manager, and has been really, really unhappy. And I do think there's maybe something in that, going from a situation where she's in a really unhappy situation to coming to this. And, to your point on the commercial side of it, 56,000 tickets sold today. Don't get me wrong, Arsenal have sold this stadium out before Chloe Kelly arrived, but I can't prove this, but I imagine her presence put a couple of thousand on the attendance. So there definitely is that side of it. But yeah, I'm with you as well in that I kind of think the wide players will be paired off a little bit. I think you've got Caitlin and Chloe, and I think you've got Beth and Mariona, really. And maybe you don't want to, I wouldn't want Chloe Kelly and Caitlin forward ideally, and I haven't really seen Beth and Mariona work when they've both been out wide, but kind of mixing and matching those combinations strikes me as a really good way forward. So we'll see on that. But yeah, to your point.
And another final point on that too is I was watching her interview on the BBC, and they were talking about her building relationships, and it was Ellen White talking about how much she appreciated having Kelly and Hemp in the team, and they were talking about it with Russo. But these players have played before, right? Beth and Kelly have played before. Russo and Kelly have played
Yep.
before. They've been in the same team. I think there is an advantage to maintaining those connections as well. So I think, especially, and even from Kelly's point of view, right? Like if she's playing with Beth and Russo, maybe that's maybe that's an advantage to her getting back into the team over someone like Nikita Paris, who doesn't play with Russo and doesn't play with Leah Williamson.
Oh, and Jess Naz as well. Like generally speaking, like because Beth England's out of favour, so yeah, she doesn't really have those connections either. Jess Naz, kind of incidentally, if people don't know, also came through Arsenal's academy a few years ago. Although she was going by the surname Ngunga when she was at Arsenal, which is why that detail might have escaped some of you. But and then a couple of other substitutions, which I kind of want to talk about quickly. Not so much as like game-changing changes or anything, but like Adina comes on for Steph Catley and Kim comes on in midfield. And on one hand, like Adina probably comes on because Lotta's injured, which feels like such a shame for her, particularly like having really, I think, posed a big question, really putting up a challenge to get back in the starting 11. She's in the England squad. It's kind of weird when she was playing for Arsenal every week. Serena didn't seem to want to pick her, and now she's not. She's in the England squad, which is a bit odd. But Lotta being injured, and then Kim comes on, and the club announced this week that they've triggered a 1-year option in Kim Little's contract. And yeah, because there has been, I've seen a little bit of debate about that online, not loads and loads, but what did you make of Kim having her contract extended by 1 more year?
I think I was absolutely fine with it. I think Kim Little's at the stage where I think she gets to dictate when it's so, like, I really don't see her going to another club after Arsenal, so she gets to dictate when it's over. And I think we can trust her to make that decision. She decided when she didn't want to play for Scotland anymore. So I think she knows, and I think to me it was a no-brainer, right? She's still at the level. Is she at the level twice a week for 90 minutes? No. And I think we've seen that this season. We've seen her minutes managed, as you and Jamie have said on the podcast before. But she's still very much at the level. And I think too, there's another benefit to having Kim around, Kim in the building. This is outside of Kim and Wally. This is a really young midfield, right? Like, and I imagine that was some of the attractiveness of Kira Walsh, and that she was in that kind of prime age bracket. But Kyra Cooney-Cross, it was her birthday yesterday, and so she's only just 23. And then obviously Palova, she's 25. But you don't really have that 27, 28-year-old in there. And so I think just having someone of Kim's experience is really important, especially because these are two players who still need to, learn aspects of the position. So for me, it was kind of a no-brainer. And yeah, I get that she's 35, but it's fine. She's not going to be playing every single minute of every single game. So I think it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I look at the value someone like Jen Beattie had, even when she wasn't playing every single week. And Kim, to your point, Kim's like, even if Kim is not prime Kim anymore, prime Kim is one of the best British women's footballers of all time. So perhaps being a little bit below that is still really, really good. I also think, like with squad players, realistically, you're either getting players at the beginning of their career, like Catherine Cool, for example, or players towards the end of their career, because like players in their prime and or around that kind of age, they don't want to do those roles, and they shouldn't want to do those roles either. You should either be learning the job, or you should be winding down isn't the right word, but someone who probably knows, I can't play like 270 minutes every week. But I won't say too much more on this, because actually the newsletter is going to be about this next week. But I think there are some justified concerns about the overall age profile of the Arsenal squad, but I also don't think that means you just get rid of every player that's over 30. I think you assess it on a case-by-case basis. I also think the kind of role Kim plays, like She's not a fullback. She's not a winger. She's not a wing back. Like, those are the areas where, you mentioned Raheem Sterling, right? If Raheem Sterling was a defensive midfielder, he'd probably be fine about now, but he's an explosive wide player, or he used to be. And so being 30, 31 is a bit, can be a bit of a problem in those positions, whereas it isn't, I don't think, in those deeper lying positions. But and then we get Jenna Nyswanger on. I'm interested in what you think of this signing as someone who certainly watches more NWSL than I do, but bringing Jenna Nyswanger into the squad from Gotham in January.
Yeah, it's an interesting signing. I think as a player, she is fairly new to playing fullback, and you can see that there are some. She does need to kind of work on her defensive game. She actually lost her place at Gotham towards the end of last season. Juan Carlos Amaros went with basically Mandy Freeman, who, for those of you who don't know, is essentially a centre back, but he played her at left back, and he went with Bruninha at right back, and then also Jess Carter came into the team, so that again enabled sort of centre halves to move out to fullback, and then obviously Jess Carter herself is a very accomplished fullback. And I think she mostly lost her place because of, there's some defensive things to work out. I think in most WSL games it's going to be fine. And the one thing I will also say about Gotham is that they are a really structured team. They're really good defensively, really well organized. And they're a very comfortable possession team. They actually, I believe, played more passes per 90 minutes than Jonathan Heraldez' Washington Spirit. So I think stylistically that makes her a good fit, and I think those defense. I think she was absolutely fine as a fullback in a lot of games, and I think in part because there's a good structure. So I think if we have a good structure, she's going to be absolutely fine, and then she can do those things that we were talking about earlier with Katie McCabe. She is a really good passer of the ball. That's how she came up. She came up as a sort of central midfield player, more attacking player, but she's really comfortable on the ball, and I think it was a good signing. I was pleased to see it. I think there's versatility there that's going to make her really useful and really adaptable.
Yeah. I think the phrase I kind of used is floor raiser rather than ceiling raiser, which is every team has to make a lot of those signings, actually. And, I guess staying on the theme of American fullbacks, very, very nice cherry on the cake of this game is Emily Fox with an absolute golazzo. And I think I said last season, Emily Fox takes more shots, I think, than any fullback in the league, because she's allowed to come in centrally quite a lot. She actually gets on the edge of the area quite a lot, and she tends to shoot about once a game, which for a fullback is like a very, very high number. But I mean, this is a great goal, and I was just delighted for her that she got, as someone, I think that everyone really understands how good a player she is and what she does. But obviously when you're a fullback, it's, you're only going to get so much kind of praise for this. So, not just from this game, but as a culmination of her time at Arsenal, I'm just delighted she got this moment.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked. This is her first WSL goal. And only her second goal overall, because she is in that position at least once a game, and she's had some really good shots from the edge of the area. Just a great, brilliant goal, and a player who I think has been incredibly reliable, not only in terms of playing qualities, but just also she plays pretty much every game. Obviously, she didn't start against LCL, but she's been really reliable for us, and I think just such a good player who has so many, who I think is versatile. Versatility sometimes seems like a kind of almost derogatory thing to say about the player, and that, you're good at, you're not great at one thing, but you're decent at 3 or 4 things. This is a player who's really good at multiple facets. She's a really good carrier of the ball. She's a really good passer of the ball, and that's what enables her to do essentially multiple jobs, right? She comes in, she inverts, she comes inside, she goes on the overlap. I think she's just been, one of even when the majority of, I think, the team was struggling at the beginning of the season, she was still playing really well. She was still at the level required. And I think that's really a hallmark of someone who's a top player.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a lot of focus at Arsenal at the moment on that, shall we say, coming leadership group. Some of those players who are in their mid-20s, Russo, Emily Fox, obviously Leah, hoping she's still here, is going to be the next Arsenal captain. And I think, there's some focus on those players, and rightly so, because I think that is going to be kind of the next leadership group, and getting some of those players tied down is going to be a real priority as well, because you can see that's the core of this team, with like someone like Van Domselaar as well coming into that, Cooney Cross, Palova, like a lot of these players, that's where the baton's going to go, and that's where the contract money is going to need to go as well. But why don't we take a break there, and we will come back in part 2 with your questions right after this. Okay, welcome back to the Arsenal Women Arsecast with me, Tim Stillman, and stepping into the co-host chair this week, Aidan Gibson, because Jamie is in her sick bed. But as ever, we're doing questions on Blue Sky for part 2. And Aidan, I'm going to send this one your way. And actually, we had quite a few questions about the midfield partnerships. And there are 2 I'm going to pick out about KCC and Leah Volti. So the first one is at Ariel AW. For the last 2 years, Kyra Wally combo hasn't worked that well, to the point of people thinking we couldn't use both at the same time. Today felt a lot smoother. I think that's a result of the opponent's lack of pressure, of changing strategies, or an evolution in the aims of the partnership. And also Grace at Lesbian Stacey asks, really interested to see the KCC Volti central midfield pairing. Seem to be as Lee as the pivot, but with KCC alternating between a double pivot and pushing forward more. Thoughts on this moving forward?
Yeah, I thought, to me, we spoke about this a little bit earlier about questions about partnerships working, and questions that we don't really ask anymore. And I think I'm starting to come to thinking that Kyra and Leah not an issue. I think the really clever thing that Renee has done is sort of given Kyra those instructions about what to do off the ball in terms of pressing, using her kind of as that focus for where Arsenal want to press, because that means that you can use her not just on the left side. Obviously, I think she's a little bit more comfortable there, and she plays one really good pass for Russo. That's when the hump gets booked from that left side. But she was predominantly on the right-hand side today, and I think to me it makes sense that this partnership has worked, just because like Leah Valti is a really adaptable player, right? 2-footed, so it stands to reason that she can kind of do both. And so I think really when we're thinking about sort of future partnerships, I think one of Kim or Leah and Kyra is one that you can say absolutely that works. I guess the real question is, okay, what happens if you don't have Kim or Leah? So yeah, I think that's sort of like, I think, yeah, Kyra pushing forward more, I think that really just uses her strength. She's really good at snapping at the ball and winning the ball back, and I think you want to use that player higher up. I think she's a bit wasted in a kind of deeper position if you're just sort of restricting her there. So I think again, this is just sort of fitting the profile of the player and finding a role that really works.
Yeah, definitely, and I think you're right. She pretty much always needs one of Kim or Leah next to her. But yeah, I've been really enthused by the way Renee's made this work. Have you got a question for me?
Do.
You're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
I do. So we talked about her coming back, but Helen at HXM829 bsky.social asked, "Hi Tim, what were your thoughts on Kelly's performance from the crowd? It looked like she had a couple of rusty moments, understandable given her minutes, but overall looked like she added quite a bit of dynamism and gave Renee something different to play with in my very #armchair expert opinion."
Yeah, this was a weird one because she was on a different. So where the press box is kind of towards the goal we were attacking in the first half, the clock end goal. So like Chloe Kelly was completely the other side, like right over to the other corner. So I didn't get a great look at it. Usually, like depending on which side of the stadium you sit, one half you get a really, really good look at like a fullback and a winger. But I didn't get a massively close look. I thought clearly there was a little bit of rust there, not loads, but maybe the touch was loose a little bit. But I thought this was just a really good game for her to come into. Like once it's 3-0 on 58 minutes, let her come on, give the crowd something to cheer and all of that. But I also think that in this game, again, Tottenham generally quite weak at defending on their left side. They focus a lot of their attacks there. I don't think they're great off the ball there. And like Spurs were trying to bait Arsenal into crossing the ball. I don't think that's really a problem for Chloe Kelly at all. I think that's kind of what she wants to do. But the thing I'm quite interested in is if she'll ever play on the left. I kind of think not. She's played the vast majority of her football on the right, but sometimes, like for England and City, they switch those wingers. I'd be interested to see if that happens. I tend to think maybe not. I tend to think maybe the way Renee's doing this is Caitlin has been on the right more this season, that it's like the left-sided player comes in and the right-sided player stays outside. But I think the game state also just made it very tricky to judge because we were 3-0 up, and at that point it's almost olays from the crowd. So I don't have a big conclusion about her performance, and I kind of don't think, both because of her own likely rustiness and the game state and the fact that I wasn't in the best position to see it, I don't have a huge take on it. But one thing I will say is that playing with Emily Fox is going to make things very, very easy for her. Caitlin has adapted to playing on that side very, very easily as well this season. So, yeah, I think I'd need to see her in a kind of better game state, and where she's going to become a very important player is perhaps around some of those cup games. Well, now it's only the FA Cup really that she's cup tied, but that's going to really give her like WSL minutes. I think. I'm going to ask you this one, and it's from at Biased Arsenal Chicago Stars. Which players do you think have improved most under Renee? And are there any players, brackets maybe Stina, who have regressed under Renee? So improved, and anyone that you think may be looking at thinking, she doesn't seem like a Renee player, not sure how much longer she'll be here or anything like that.
Yeah, regression would have to think about that while I answer. Okay, improvement. I think a lot. I think there are a lot of players who we can say, some players that we've spent a lot of time talking about, like Kyra and like Leslie Russo. So I think actually the one that I'm going to go for is Katie McCabe, because I just think that I think there are points last season where it was an open question about like who was the better left back, Steph Catley or Katie McCabe. I think there were points at the beginning of this season where there was sort of that was an open debate. Who do you start left back? And I think under Renee, Katie's just made it clear why she's the first choice there. I think we really missed her in both games against City, especially the second one. But I guess she was eligible for that. But in any extent, I think she's, and not just improved, I think just really had a base to show the different facets of her game, right? The ability to invert, the ability to take a lot of touches, play a lot of passes, but then also her capabilities on the outside, but not just sort of overlapping up and down. She's also really clever in her movement about when she underlaps. And I think this I think there are a lot of players who've gotten some big focus onto Renee, and I think Katie was one who perhaps not as much focus, just in sort of, I think, the difference in level, because I think she was sort of regressing a little bit at the beginning of the season, and I think that's there are no question marks about her now. And then for regression, I'm not sure if I agree that Stina has regressed. I just think that there's more clarity in her role. She comes on today. She has, she had a decent cameo today. She doesn't score a goal, but she takes a couple of shots. They were both well taken. So I'm gonna go for. It's a bit harsh because I think there's such a stable. Actually, you know what? I know what I'll go for. And again, I think it's a harsh one, but Manu Zinsberg is just like, it's very clear she's the backup goalkeeper now, and she signed a new contract
that's
last
what I was
season.
thinking.
Yeah. She signed a new contract last season, and I would be very surprised if she's here. Maybe she won't go this summer. Maybe she's quite settled and fine, but I would be surprised if she sees out the entire length of that contract.
Yeah, completely agree. Like that's just the way these goalkeeper battles go. Like, whoever loses leaves, basically, particularly when they're international goalkeepers. And yeah, to your point, I don't, it's not so much that she's regressed. It's just Van Domselaar has been, I expected this to happen, but not this quickly. I have to admit, I thought there'd be a lot more rotation, but like at this stage, like there's just no argument about who is or should be.
The biggest sign for me too is that like Manu doesn't get the Subway Cup semi-final game against City. She got the game against Brighton, but she doesn't get the one against City. And I think that's the sign when your number one goalkeeper is being chosen for a cup game. That's the sign that it's done.
Yeah, I think so. What about? Oh yeah, have you got one for me? I think you're on mute again.
Yeah. So Rose at rosesh91.bskies.social. Leslie is becoming more and more of the classic striker, turning up still in the box when needed. Although she tends to sit deep, Jonas tried to turn her into one for a long time. Renee went and did it. Was it just a matter of time, or has Renee worked some magic? And we talked about Leslie a lot at the beginning of the podcast, but I guess just sort of like specifically, what do we think she's changed? And the one thing I'll add to the question too is we still see Russo not play at centre forward every game. She played out wide recently. She ends the game here as the number 10 because Stina comes on for Frida. So some of the things that happened under Jonas are still happening, but it seems to not be affecting the player as much.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think an awful lot has changed. I think probably what has changed a bit more is like Russo starts every game now, whereas under Jonas you would get games where Stina would start. And again, that maybe goes into the discussion we were having a bit earlier, where perhaps there was too much of a focus, just a touch too much of a focus on the opposition. And it's like, right, we're playing United today. They play a really high line. Let's play Stina. But I mean, we did that at City, right? And we did it for largely the same reasons, albeit there were some injuries in the forward line as well, which I think kind of meant Russo had to play wide, really. But yeah, because the Russo I see now is largely the one that I saw finish last season. I know Jonas talked about, I remember being surprised at how forthcoming he was. I spoke to him after the London City Lionesses game last season, in the League Cup quarter-final, and Russo comes on and she scores a header. And I asked him about it, and he was really forthright about, I've told her that's where I want her. Like, that's where I want her to be. She, like, when that ball comes in, she needs to be there. And that was when he said she's the best finisher I've ever worked with. And it's clear that the balance between her coming short and attacking the box wasn't there. And I spoke to him a lot about it last season, and he was very open in those discussions. And then I think the last couple of months last season, we really start to see that. And, to your point, the last time you were on in May, we were talking about that, like, here's, Russo's arrived. So I think it's more of a question of what happened at the beginning of the season to change it, and was it just confidence? I do think that one of the things that Rene's done best, and one of the reasons we don't struggle as much with deep blocks, is just having that extra attacker. Like the best way I can describe it is we used to basically have four, and now it's five, because usually it's Katie kind of going in there one way or another, either overlapping or underlapping, and having that kind of almost back three. That slight tweak just means we're attacking with an extra body, and also we lacked creative. Well, we really lacked a creative player, I think, last season, and now we've got Mariona, so we don't lack a creative player anymore. So I think that's helped as well, having someone who has that freedom to move around, but also who will take players with her. And, I'm trying to put myself in the position of an opposition coach when you're about to play Arsenal. Like what the hell do you do with Mariona? Because you don't know where she's going to be. She's not just going to be on the left wing. She's not like I think under Jonas, it was very much like the wide players are wide, the 10 is 10, the 9 is 9. And it was like almost like a foosball table at times, where I think there's just a little bit more adaptability around her. But honestly, I think a lot of it's confidence. To be honest, I think she lost a bit of confidence at the beginning of the season, and she's got it back in spades now. And really, I'm really thrown back to something Jonas said about Beth Mead when he first came into the job. What we're seeing with Leslie now, we saw with Beth when Jonas came in, because Jonas's style really suited Beth Mead, and that attack was really built around her. I remember, she was having that great run, like going into the Euros and, coming third in the Ballon d'Or. And at the beginning of that season, like I think he'd been asked 3 or 4 times about Beth Mead's form. And I really remember him saying, not the challenge for Beth, but he was like, there's going to come a time where we stop talking about Beth's form. Because he was like, the best players in the world, you don't say they're in form, you just assume they're always in form. And I think that's the point we're getting to with Russo. And so I'll be very interested. I think that's still the only question mark is, okay, you had a lack of confidence. Like the best players just don't get that. They just don't. And, can you, or have you already gone to that place where there's no such thing as form or confidence? Like you just produce every minute of every, like, when have we ever talked about Kim Little's confidence, Kim Little's form, Leo Volti's confidence? And I know that's different because they're not strikers so much, but like, do you ever remember questioning Vivian Miedema's confidence or anything like that? Like, it's just like, no, she's just Viv, she's just going to play like that every week. So, obviously it takes a long time to really prove that, but I do think it's largely soft factors with a bit of tactical thrown in. What about this one then, which I'm going to bring in? We talked about Stina. Let's kind of continue that discussion a bit. And this is from Hannah Rachel. How much value is Stina bringing as an impact sub? I'm glad Rene now keeps Russo on in the 10 when she comes on, but I think she could have had a hat-trick if she had stayed at 9 today. Love Stina. She's a great rotation option, but sometimes it feels like the default is to sub her in, and sometimes it doesn't really benefit the team. What do you reckon about this?
I think that's a fair question, and I do think at some point it will come to a head, because I don't think Stina wants to be the backup forever. We talked about squad players earlier when talking about Kim, and I think the same very much applies to Stina. I also think in regards to today's game, the game was won, and if you don't bring Stina on for half an hour, I think that you've got to make sure you keep players sort of around, especially when Stina had been starting a lot recently. She starts 3-4 games in a row, so I think part of it is as much just keeping her involved, and if that means she plays half an hour in a game where we don't really need her, that's fine for me. I think we see the value of Stina though in, again, the game against City, and I just think that she we talk about having an extra attacker, and sometimes we just need a second player to attack the box, right? And I think with Stina, she's a player who is always going to generate threat with her movement. Um, she has, look, is she going to miss two chances? Perhaps yes, but then she might take the third. It's like what Sky Blue FC's tweeted about her after the City game. It was like, Stina can miss the can make eight chances, but you do not give her a ninth chance. She will take it. And I think, like, look, she's had a lot of value off the bench. She scored in the return fixture earlier this season as a sub, and I think there are going to be games when we need her, especially in the Champions League. And so, if that means she plays half an hour, that's fine for me. And I just think that, yeah, she's the best. One of the things that Arsenal have that a lot of clubs don't have is this strength at number 9. I think Chelsea might have that when Sam Kerr comes back, if Sam Kerr comes back at the level she was. City, I think you can make the case for, because they've got Bunny and Viv. They're obviously Viv and now Caroline, though obviously Viv and Caroline play in different positions. But I think one thing that sets Arsenal apart is they have this option as a backup number 9, and nobody else really has that. So there are going to be games when we need her, and so that means that I think that just means that, to keep her kind of in the group, to keep her connected, she's going to play pretty much every game, whether it's from the start, whether it's for half an hour. She's going to come on.
Yeah, definitely. I do think there are times when she's a bit default sub and you look at it and go, and particularly when we lose like some of Russo's hold-up play, I don't think today was that day for the reasons you set out. And yeah, I think like incredibly valuable resource. Like, of course, this player is not perfect. That's why she doesn't start. But I'd look at any bench in Europe. I'd be surprised if I could name too many backup rotation number 9s with that kind of quality. Have you got let's do one more question each. Have you got another one for me?
Yeah, so I'm going to end. We've kind of done this one already, so I think I'm just going to end. So far, who's your player of the season? I'm dreading the moment I'll need to pick between Mariona, Russo, and Fox.
Yeah, do you know what? I haven't really thought about that so much. And I think that's a really good sign. You can tell I'm stalling here. That's a really good sign that I haven't, because the last couple of seasons, like last year, if you asked me that question 365 days ago, I'd have said Lotta's got it in the bag. Asked me that question 730 days ago, I'd have said Frida's got it in the bag. Like, I think our last 2 players of the seasons have just been so obvious for such a number of reasons, whereas this year, I don't think it's as obvious, and I think that's a really, really good sign when it's not obvious. Again, I'm thinking of like the men's team last season, where like Saka doesn't even get in the top 3 type thing, and that's when you know you've played really well. It's difficult as well, because obviously as the season goes on, this is going to get less and less the case, but there's such a before Rene, after Rene curve with a lot of the players, but I'd really have Steph Catley in my thoughts. Emily Fox as well, for sure. Definitely Russo and Mariona. I think Cairo Cooney-Cross would pick up a lot of votes if that vote was done now. Daphne Van Domselaar, I think, has been really good. But I think I'd be slightly inclined to go with Katie, actually. I do think the red card at Chelsea is a strike against her, for sure, but there's a reason she plays every minute of nearly every game. There are several reasons for it, and again, you've outlined them here. I think the role she plays is so complicated, is so complex, not complicated, and I just think there are a very select few players who can do that at that level. And yeah, I think Katie would sneak into my vote. Maybe Russo as well. But yeah, I that race is wide open for the end of the season. What do you reckon? I'm going to throw that one back to you because I'm curious about this.
Yeah, I like the Casey shout. I think again Leah's been really good. Leah Williamson, especially kind of after Renee. I think, and maybe it's just because there's a run of fixtures that stick in my mind, but I think I'm going to go with Russo, just because I think she's vital against Bayern. Really important goal. She wins us. She wins us that game against Liverpool with again kind of really good with a goal that you need to score as a striker, but that wins us points. Same with her against United. That should have won us the game. So I just think like Russo, she's been really valuable, especially I think an important parts of the season, right? That United game was like the second league game under Renee. I think having a really good performance in that game was kind of vital for Bayern. I think the Bayern game, winning that was again really important for maybe not player buy-in at that point, but club buy-in for the manager. So I think I'll go with Russo, but I think there's a lot of players who have a lot of good shouts. If we're considering the whole season, that probably like if we're not discarding the kind of pre-Rene period, then I think Van Domselaar has a pretty good case too. I mean, like she makes a really good save here today, but she basically doesn't do anything. So like 95% of the game. So she could have had she could have had a cup of tea during most of that first half. But again, she makes a save when she needs to. So she's also, I think, very much in my running as well. Yeah, there's like 5 or 6 good candidates, and yeah, last 3 seasons we've really only had like one. Like it was very obviously Beth Mead in 21-22, Beth, Frida, Lotta. And this year we've got like 5, 6.
Yeah, definitely, and I think the last couple of months of the season, I genuinely not thought about it, and I think I'd not thought about it because there isn't a clear candidate. Whereas the last couple of seasons, I have thought about it because it's like, well, it's definitely going to be that player. I think we'll wrap it up there. I did have a question. I don't think we're going to quite get to it, but it was actually maybe slightly meta about content. And like paid content in particular. I don't think we're going to quite get there because we've gone quite long. But I do want to give a shout out to the Gooner fanzine who've been doing like Arsenal Women issues with Freddie Cardi kind of overseeing that for quite a while, and they went with a print issue today, which was on sale at the stadium. So really big shout out to Freddie and all the contributors to that, because that's amazing to see. Particularly, print feels retro sometimes, so quite an achievement to get all that together. So big shout out to those guys, and hopefully lots of you bought that at the ground today. But Aidan, thanks very much for stepping in, for being our Steiner off the bench for this episode.
My pleasure as always.
Thanks very much, and you can follow Aidan. It's old Beltran's Mole, right?
Beltran's Old Mole.
That's it.
Yeah, that's the handle on Blue Sky. I'm still occasionally on X, but don't follow me on X.
And Aidan does our kind of on the whistle match reports as well. So really thanks again for stepping in, and we'll come back with another episode. I'm not sure yet whether we'll do one during the international break. I think Jamie and I discussed just doing an overall mailbag because we get so many great questions that we don't quite get to always, but things like the future of the midfield and what that looks like, and really quite meaty questions. So I think, hoping Jamie manages to clamber out of her sick bed in the coming days, we'll perhaps do like a bit of a mailbag during the international break. But other than that, obviously we'll be back with one after our next game against West Ham at home. which is really confusing because the men also have West Ham at home next, but on a different weekend. So my brain's kind of really struggling to juggle both of those things. But yeah, we'll probably put a mailbag together, and then if not, we'll definitely speak to you after Arsenal versus West Ham at Meadow Park on the 2nd of March. And until then, thanks very much, and we will speak to you very, very soon.